Imagine being 50 years old and making a that change your entire life. You are taking the court, separate from your school and community, and publicly described as a criminal. Show society define you forever by the worst decision you made as a teenager? Or shall the justice system hold you responsible while also helping you return to school, repair the harm, and build a different future? Every crime has a victim, and every victim deserves justice. However, adolescents are still developed emotionally, socially, and neurologically. This creates one of the most difficult questions in modern justice. Should juvenile offenders be punished, or should they be rehabilitated? Welcome to Justice in Focus, the podcast where we examine law, human rights, and social conflicts through real evidence and global perspectives. I'm Amanda, your host. Today we are discussing juvenile crime and chilling systems of adolescents' criminal responsibility. We will explain how to respond when a person between 14 and 17 commits a crime. We will also examine a real chilling case, review evidence about rehabilitation, and compare chill approaches with Norway and the United States. Joining me today is Sofia, a student researcher who has studied young justice, restorative justice, and social reintegration. Welcome, Sofia.
Thank you, Amanda. This is an important issue because juvenile justice must respond to two legitimate concerns. First, society has a duty to protect victims and public safety. Second, the law must recognize that adolescents are different from adults and still have that capacity to change. The debate is not really about choosing between accountability and rehabilitation. A responsible system should include both.
Let's begin with a real case from Chile. In 1925, Chile's National Young Social Reintegration Service published the testimony of a young man from Ovalle. His name was not disclosed because he was a minor or young participant in the justice system. After becoming involved in a crime and conflict, he participated in a community service and restorative process connected with a local social and sports club. He described the experience as a major change in his life and explained that, through the process, he began to understand the seriousness and consequences of what had happened. Instead, it only began locking away. He had to confront the harm, accept responsibility, and perform meaningful work within his community. This does not mean that his actions were ignored. He received a legal response, but the response was designed to help him recognize the damage, develop responsibility, and reduce the possibility of committing another offense. His experience raises the central question of this episode. Would society have been safer if he had simply been punished, or can rehabilitation produce a more lasting form of justice?
That case is important because restorative justice is not the absence of consequences. The young person must recognize the harm caused and participate actively in repairing it. Traditional punishment often asks what law was broken and what penalty does the offender deserve. Restorative justice asks other questions. Who was harmed? What does the victim need? How can the offender take responsibility? And what must change to prevent the harm from happening again? The Chilean case shows that accountability and rehabilitation can operate together.
How does Chilean law deal with juvenile offense?
Chile's main legal framework is Law 20,084 on adolescent criminal responsibility. It established a specialized criminal justice system for adolescents who are between 14 and 17 years old when they committed an offense. This means that adolescents can be held legally responsible, but they should not be treated exactly like adults. The system includes different sections, such as warnings, fines, community service, supervised release, intensive supervisions, and deprivation of liberty for more serious offenses. An important principle is that sanctions should contribute to the young person's social reintegration. Chile later approved Law 21,527, which created the National Youth Social Reintegration Service and introduced change intended to make interventions more specialized and effective. The reform also incorporated juvenile criminal mediation, through which a victim and an adolescent may, in appropriate cases, reach an agreement to repair the harm with the support of a mediator.
So, rehabilitation doesn't not mean that young people face no consequences?
Exactly. Our rehabilitative system still imposes responsibility. However, it tries to choose a consequence that protects society, recognizes the victim, and addresses the reasons behind the offending behavior. Those reasons may include school exclusion, family violence, poverty, substance use, criminal recruitment, untreated mental health conditions, or the absence of supportive adults. None of these factors justifies a crime, but if the justice system ignores them, it may punish the young person within reducing the risk of another offense.
Well, statistics help us understand these issues. We belong stereotypes. Research presented by UNICEF Chile has shown that among adolescents deprived of liberty in Chile, approximately 14.5% has experienced domestic violence during childhood. 14.5% has lived with someone who had been imprisoned, and 56% had a list of mental health disorder. These figures do remove personal responsibility. However, they demonstrate that many adolescents enter the justice system has experienced serious disadvantages and violation of their rights before committing an offense.
That's why prevention and rehabilitation are essential. When society waits until a vulnerable child commits a serious crime, the response arrives very late. Effective juvenile justice should begin before detention. It should include safe school, mental health care, family support, addiction treatment, protection from criminal organizations, and opportunities to participate in the community. It must also continue after a sentence. A young person leaving detention needs education, employment opportunities, identification documents, health care, and positive relationships. Without those supports, society may release the adolescent into the same conditions that contribute to the original offense.
Chile has also collected direct experience of young people with the justice system. A national participatory consultation includes 107 individual interviews and 48 group workshops with adolescents and young adults in 12 Chilean regions. Participants include young men, young women, migrants, indigenous participants, and members of sexual and gender-diverse communities. Their testimony describes detention as both a place of learning and a place of punishment. They also discussed loneliness, repeated violation of rights, and meaning of the crime in their lives, and their hopes for a future project. These are not a fictional story. They are the documental voices of people receiving sanctions in Chile's young justice system.
Listening to them does not mean forgetting the victims. Victims must receive information, protection, emotional support, and meaningful opportunities for reparation. But justice becomes more effective when it understands everyone affected by the offense. If a young person completes a sentence but returns to crime, the victim has not been protected in the long term. For that reason, reducing reoffending is one of the most important forms of public safety.
Some people argue that rehabilitation sounds so lazy, especially when violent crimes are involved. What are the main arguments in favor of a stronger punishment?
Supporters of harsher sanctions usually make three arguments. First, punishment expresses society's condemnation of serious harm. Second, detention may temporarily protect the public from an individual considered dangerous. Third, severe penalties are expected to discourage other young people from committing crimes. These concerns cannot simply be dismissed. When a serious event occurs, victims and communities may experience further trauma and danger. A justice system that ignores those emotions isn't public trust. However, the key question is whether harsher punishment actually prevents future crime. If a severe sanction increases the likelihood of reoffending, it may appear through while ultimately making society less safe.
What does international evidence say about detention and rehabilitation?
UNICEF argues that depriving children of liberty should be a last resort and should last for the shortest appropriate period. It also reports that the earlier a child is diverted from the formal justice system, when events and circumstances make diversion appropriate, the greater the opportunity for rehabilitation, reintegration, and positive outcomes. Community-based supportive interventions can be more effective at reducing reoffending than institutional programs based primarily on confinement. UNICEF Chile has also warned that longer periods of adolescent incarceration are associated with fewer opportunities for effective social reintegration. International trends therefore favor alternatives to detention, restorative justice, and strong investment in prevention and family support.
Let's compare Chile with Norway. How does Norway respond to juvenile crime?
Norway's minimum age of criminal responsibility is 15. Its official approach emphasizes avoiding the imprisonment of children whenever possible. Norway has developed non-custodial sanctions for offenders under 18 based on restorative justice principle. These measures may involve structured supervision, dialogue, education, treatment, and agreements designed to prevent further offending. Norway still uses detention in serious cases, so it will be incorrect to say that the country never punished adolescents. The difference is that imprisonment is treated as an exceptional measure rather than the normal response. The system focuses on preparing the young person to live lawfully after the sanction ends.
So, the Norwegian model does not ask only how much suffering should be offered experience, it also asks what intervention will make another crime less likely.
Exactly, that is a public safety perspective as well as a human rights perspective. Almost every detained adolescent will eventually return to society. The conditions in which that person returns matter. A young person who leaves detention with education, treatment, and support is generally better prepared than one who leaves more traumatized, disconnected, and socially excluded.
The United States represents a different and much more varied model.
Yes, the United States does not have a single uniform juvenile justice system. Laws differ significantly between states. Historically, many states expanded mechanisms for transferring adolescents accused of serious crimes to adult criminal courts. Supporters claim that adult prosecution will create stronger deterrence and deliver a tool for justice. However, research reviewed by the United States Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention found serious reasons for concern. Studies from jurisdictions such as Florida and Minnesota found that young people transferred to adult courts had higher recidivism rates than comparable adolescents kept within juvenile systems. A more recent research review also found that several studies associated transfer to adult courts with increased reoffending, while evidence of a deterrent effect remained weak or inconsistent.
This is a surprising result. Policies designated to be tougher may actually increase the risk of future crime.
Yes, adult prisons can expose adolescents to violence, criminal networks, and environments that are not designed for their developmental needs. The comparison does not mean that every American program is punitive. The United States also has education, community treatment, specialized courts, and evidence-based rehabilitation programs. But it demonstrates the risks of assuming that a longer or harsher sentence automatically produces greater safety.
Where does Chile stand between these two models?
Chile has a mixed system. Its law recognizes accountability and permits deprivation of liberty for serious offenses. At the same time, it declares social reintegration to be a central objective and has created a specialized national service. The legal design is promising, but implementation is the real challenge. Rehabilitation requires trained professionals, safe centers, individual intervention plans, access to mental health service, continuity of education, and support after release. Creating a new institution does not automatically solve years of fragmentation or inequality. The National Youth Social Reintegration Service reported that during the first half of 2025, 93% of people it served were men, 93% were Chilean, and 47% were already 18 or older, because sanctions imposed for adolescent offense continue into young adulthood. This reminds us that the transition into adulthood is a critical period. Without education or reclaiming, young people may struggle to create a new identity outside crime.
We have focused heavily on offenders. How can we make sure the victims are not forgotten?
The first system must place victims as the center as well. Victims need to be heard, protected, and informed. They may require medical treatment, psychological support, legal assistance, and financial reparation. Restorative processes should never be forced on them. Participation must be voluntary and carefully assessed. In appropriate cases, meditation can allow a victim to explain the real consequences of the offense and ask questions that a conventional trial may never answer. The adolescent, in turn, must listen, accept responsibility, and agree to meaningful forms of repair. For some victims, this can be more meaningful than watching a young person receive a punishment without ever understanding the harm. For others, restorative mediation will not be appropriate or desired. Justice must respect both possibilities.
After review the law, the real testimonies, and the international evidence, should juvenile offenders be punished or rehabilitated?
My conclusion is that this is a false choice. Juvenile offenders must be held accountable, especially when they have caused serious harm. But accountability should be designed to prevent future crime. Sanction that only causes suffering without education, treatment, or reintegration may satisfy an immediate desire for punishment but fail society in the long term. Rehabilitation does not erase the offense, it asks the offender to understand it, accept responsibility, repair what can be repaired, and develop the ability to live without committing further harm. For dangerous or serious cases, temporary detention may be necessary. But even inside detention, the objective should remain rehabilitation, because the adolescent will probably return to the community. The strongest justice system is not necessarily the one that imposes the longest sentence. It is the one that protects victims, reduces reoffending, and gives young people a realistic path away from crime.
The real young man from Ovalle did not avoid his responsibility. He served his sanction and confronted the consequences of his action through community work. His experiences cannot prove that every young offender will change, but it demonstrated that change is possible when the justice system creates the condition for it. Till the challenge is not to choose between public safety and adolescents' right. The challenge is to create a system in which these two goals reinforce each other. Punishment may communicate that an action was wrong. Rehabilitation tries to make sure it doesn't not happen again. Perhaps true justice requires both accountability and possibility of transformation. You have been listening to Justice in Focus. Today we explored Chile Adolescents Criminal Responsibility Law, the new social reintegration systems, real testimonies for young people, and different approaches used in Norway and the United States. Our central question was, should juvenile offenders be punished or rehabilitated? The evidence suggests that young people must face proportionate consequence, but punishment alone is not enough. A safer society requires prevention, accountability, victim support, education, rehabilitation, and genuine opportunities from reintegration. Thank you, Sofia, for joining us.
Thank you, Amanda. Juvenile justice is ultimately about the kind of society we want to create. One that responds to harm seriously, but also understands that adolescents can learn, mature, and change.
And thank you for your listening. Until the next time, keep asking difficult questions about justice, law, and human rights. This is Justice in Focus.